All right, everybody. Hi and welcome. We're going to give it a minute or two to give everybody a little bit of time to settle in and get set up for our session today. My name is Yenny. I am the CEO and founder here at Kari Prehab. And these sessions, the Meet the Expert sessions, we organize these on approximately a monthly basis. We really like hosting these. They're a lovely way for us to get to connect directly with you, all of our community members, and to also hear from you and what your questions and your concerns are about exercising for osteoporosis. So these are really designed to be just extremely informal, friendly, loose, organic sessions, and for you to be able to ask anything that you have on your mind, whether it's relating to exercise for bone density in general, the specifics of our program, or anything to do with the research behind these methods that we're utilizing. And you're welcome to drop your questions into the chat at any time. As we get going, you'll have the opportunity to continue asking questions throughout the session. So don't be shy or hesitate to drop those into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself if you'd rather ask your question kind of live in person like that. I do want to let you know that this session is being recorded, and we'll share it with our newsletter subscribers tomorrow. So if you'd prefer for your voice or your likeness to not be on the recording, then I recommend using the chat for the purposes of this session. So as we get started, I would like to introduce you to the members of our team and a special guest that we have here as well, one of our recent program graduates who was kind enough to agree to join us to give the client perspective today. So we have Michaela Smith, our program director, Karen Weinstein, one of our senior coaches, Sarah Dimmick, who's one of our excellent coaches that just joined us this past year, joined our team. And then, of course, Leah, our client. So I'm hoping that each of you can maybe take just a 30 to 60 seconds to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background so that the attendees know who they're talking with and chatting with today. Michaela, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, my name is Michaela. My background, it started with yoga. So I've been a yoga practitioner and teacher for a really long time. And then eventually I started to see some gaps in my own movement practice and got really interested in strength training. And then strength training brought me to working with women with osteoporosis. Since then, I am the co-creator of an in-person program here in upstate New York. And we were seeing really great results with our in-person program. And so that led us to want to support more people outside of our small town. And that brought us to connect with Kari and bring this program into a virtual session as well. So my role as a program director and the co-creator of the program is to oversee the cohorts, support the coaches, and make sure the clients are having a really great experience. So I'm happy to be here to talk all things bone density with you guys today.
Thanks for being here, Michaela. Karen, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen. I'm in central New Jersey. I have a similar background to Michaela in that I started with yoga. I've been doing and teaching yoga for over 20 years. And I've always attracted a slightly older clientele. And as everyone was aging, they were starting to get their DEXA scans and starting to learn that they had low bone density. I had a personal training certification already, but I just wasn't doing much with it because I was so focused on yoga. And that really helped to kind of shift my perspective a little bit because I started realizing also what kind of gaps there were in the types of exercise that women are told and taught to do. And so I started learning everything that I possibly could about bone density and what I could do to help my clients. So here I am.
Thanks so much for joining us, Karen. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Sarah. I'm representing the Midwest. So I'm in Wisconsin. Yeah, all those East Coasters out there always have to figure out the time zone thing. Just joined Kari, but my background is also in yoga medicine therapeutic specialist. And I work in our local community, doing a lot of classes for our silver sneakers. So our older populations, and I've really enjoyed that and finding ways to make exercise accessible and adaptable for all. And this just feels like the next step on the journey of learning more for myself and helping to bring that to new people. So excited to be on the call today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And if you saw this session advertised in our newsletters, you maybe noticed that Ken Rhodes, one of our other senior coaches, was scheduled to be here today until he realized that he had miscalendared himself. So we're actually very lucky to have Sarah to bring an alternative perspective today to the session, and that she was ready and willing to hop in and come and join us today. So thanks again, Sarah. And then last but not least, Leah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here with you. I live in Central Virginia, and it was maybe 3 years ago I fell and broke my foot, which ended up with a decision from my healthcare providers that maybe I should have a DEXA scan, and that revealed to my surprise that I had osteoporosis. And so I needed to figure out what I was going to do and how I was going to respond to that new information. And I was just so thrilled when I encountered the CARI program, and it's really been a life changer for me. And so I'm really happy to be here to share what my experience has been and to offer my perspective. So thanks for having me here.
Thanks for joining. And just to provide a little bit more context, I hope you don't mind, Leah. Part of the reason that we connected and ended up asking her to join this session was because she got in touch with us with some extremely impressive follow-up DEXA scan results after being in our program for a while. So we were obviously thrilled for her because her consistency and her hard work had paid off in the exact way that we would have hoped. So let's get going. We already have a couple of questions in the chat. If you're just joining us, as a reminder, you can drop your questions into the chat at any time or unmute yourself if you have something to ask. The weighted vests are a common source of consternation or just concern or just asking for more feedback. They've been a really kind of hot topic on social media lately. So maybe we can just start with the basics of what weighted vests are and what the intended stimulus or mechanism is that they are providing in the context of osteoporosis. So, Karen, maybe you can start us off with, the first question from June is, please talk about weighted vests. So just give us an overview going from there.
Yeah, so usually when we get asked to speak about weighted vests, it's obviously in that context is we're hearing a lot of kind of social media influencers saying that you should be wearing a weighted vest and walking to help with bone density. So weighted vest does have a role in working with osteoporosis, but it may not be in the way that you think that it is. So what the research shows is that walking with a weighted vest alone or wearing a weighted vest while you're going about your daily activities really just isn't enough stimulus to make an effective change in your bone density. But what we have found from the research is that when you wear a weighted vest while you're doing impact training, resistance training, or balance work, that does help to prevent falls and fractures. There's an improvement in your balance when you wear a weighted vest doing balance exercises versus when you don't. And all of the research that has been shown, when you're wearing a weighted vest, a lot of it isn't done on people who are walking. It's done on people who are doing resistance training and impact training. And that's where it's been shown to make a difference.
Thanks. That's a really great question because we do get this sort of quandary of like, shouldn't I just throw on a weighted vest and call it a day? But actually, what the research so far shows is that it isn't an effective bone density intervention on its own for a number of reasons. So in our program, we do treat it as kind of like the icing on the cake or a little bit of an adjunct to the meat and potatoes of the resistance and impact training, since the research overwhelmingly shows those to be the most effective modalities. Great question here about the weighted vest in particular as it relates to severe osteoporosis in the lumbar spine. Also, hi, Michelle. Nice to see you again. Michaela, maybe you can tackle this one and talk about the specific mechanical input that we're generating with the weighted vest and how it relates to bone density and osteoporosis. And maybe you guys just kind of tie that into like the severity of the diagnosis.
Sure. So when it comes to the stimulus that's going to cause your bones to lay down more tissue and become more dense, we're actually looking for compression. And what we can think of is a top-down loading, so a kind of a pushing together of the bones using gravity and external forces outside of gravity as well, because we're all very adapted to gravity, having lived on this planet our entire lives. So we want to find a force that helps to create a healthy compression evenly around the vertebra. So that compression is what tells the bones to lay down new tissue. And when it comes to the weighted vest, they're a really great way to create a little bit of that additional healthy compression because they evenly load around the body versus something like a backpack, which is going to be very back heavy. So we create that nice even loading around the vertebra. And when it comes to the severity of the spine, the bones are going to respond to that compression regardless of the severity. And that's actually what we want in order to stimulate new bone growth. So when it comes to severe osteoporosis in the lumbar spine and wearing a weighted vest, that's actually the stimulus you want. What you would want to be mindful of is not flexing the spine deeply while wearing the weighted vest because that might put a little bit more pressure towards the front of the vertebra and increase the risk for compression fractures. So in our program, every exercise that we use the weighted vest for, we're very mindful of keeping a nice long neutral spine so that we're getting that nice healthy compression evenly across the vertebra.
Great explanation. Thanks so much, Michaela. And I'm sure that we're going to discuss this concept of axial loading quite a bit more throughout this session. So if that's a new term for you or you're unfamiliar with that, we can certainly come back to it. But as Michaela mentioned, it's this top-down loading pattern that is actually creating a healthy compressive force that the bones then respond to. This is a great question. Also, Leah, I'm going to throw this one your way. So, any tips on how to stay motivated with a virtual program, aside from not wanting to crumble, of course, that is a solid motivator. Leah, maybe you can talk a little bit about this just from your experience as a client in the program.
Sure. And I think part of that has to do with knowing yourself and what you need to help you stay motivated so you can be mindful around that and help yourself succeed. So for me, I knew that I needed to choose a level of programming where I'd have accountability, which is why Karen is my coach. And so if I, get off track or need a little nudge, Karen's there to do that for me in a very loving and supportive way. And I just need that. I need somebody else's eyes on my program to make sure that I'm doing what I've committed to do. And I think another thing that I've noticed in my time with the program is that I think one of the things I love is I feel so supported the whole way through. Like I have videos that I can watch that remind me how to have good form and how to do the exercise. And this sense of confidence building so that I know what it is I'm going to be doing when I go through the workout that day. And so that also helps with the motivation. For me personally, it's mostly having Karen be my accountability partner to say, okay, how's it going? And I see you missed a workout. Looking forward to seeing when you get one completed. So it's that sense of, I know I need that in order to stay true to myself. But there's so much support along the way that it really does make it pretty easy to stay on track. So grateful for that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Leah. And one of the things that we definitely hear from our clients too is that as you get into kind of a groove and a habit and a routine where this is a regular part of your week and your day, then there is a sense of intrinsic motivation that starts to kick in as well, where you feel motivated yourself because it's something that you feel is beneficial, that your body is really like benefiting from as well. So it once the habit is formed, it almost feels harder to not do it than the other way around. But
one thing I would add about that too, Yenny, is that once you're into the maintenance level, like you've graduated from the program, there's enough flexibility in it so that when your life gets crazy and you need to swap out a day or like you've got the freedom and the flexibility once you've got that pattern in place. And that's a lovely aspect too, because everybody's life gets into times when things come up and you need to have that flexibility. So knowing that that's built into the program too also makes it possible to stay with it.
That's a great point. We talk a lot about this notion that it's about consistency rather than perfection. So, there's going to be some days where you staying consistent looks very different from other days, and that could be that you do half of the workout and come back to the other half later, or even on a different day. But what we're looking for is this long-term consistency. So it does not have to be at 100% each and every day at all. Thank you for sharing that, Leah. I really appreciate that. And I'm wondering from a coaching perspective, Sarah, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the sort of logistical and practical ways that you, for example, interact with your clients in the program, how the program is structured, the delivery, how you work with it to help people stay on track and motivated.
Yeah, good question. And I think this kind of program is actually the best of both worlds because you do have a lot of the flexibility to do the workouts when you want, but there's also a nice opportunity for community. So you'll get to know the people in your cohort. We do offer office hours. We offer a week where we'll explain what's coming up for the next week. So you really understand A, how to use the program and the technology, and then B, you'll get to see other people and hear for their questions and hear what's working for them and hear where they're struggling. And then we just learn from each other. So I think it is really nice to have the virtual program, but a lot of places to connect. And then as a coach, if I'm working one-on-one with somebody, it is just sort of, you'll be keeping track of your workouts, letting us know how they felt, how much weight you lifted. And then we can cheer you on, or we can answer questions. If you're like, oh, lunge didn't feel quite right today, do you have any suggestions? We can give you some suggestions for that. We can encourage you to say, yeah, I think you're ready to increase weight here a little bit. Give it a try and let us know how it feels. You can let us know, like, this yoga stretch didn't feel quite right. Is there something else I can do? And we can give you options for that. So I think, as Leah was saying, there's lots of connection points, which makes it work, I think, for everybody. You can find something for you.
Thanks so much for sharing that. I think that's a really good thing to point out as well that, we talked about you're kind of accountable to the coach who's definitely tracking and monitoring your progress and your compliance kind of behind the scenes. But you also have this cohort, this group of peers that you're going through the program with. And in a way, you become accountable to them too, because you're all meeting together on Zoom regularly and hearing about each other's successes and struggles. So there's definitely a sense of community and peer support and accountability that comes from that, but also the sense that you're in it together, which I think is a real kind of morale booster for a lot of people. We do hear from a lot of our clients as they're coming in that receiving the diagnosis and trying to figure out what to do can feel kind of isolating because there's a lot of conflicting, contradictory information. And, sometimes the guidance that comes with the diagnosis is not the most optimistic or encouraging. It tends to be more restrictive. So when you are able to kind of connect with a slightly more movement optimistic mindset and approach and other people who are kind of taking the plunge with you and going for it together, then that is like incredibly motivating for a lot of people as well. Thanks so much for sharing that, Sarah. That was excellent, like an excellent viewpoint from the coaching perspective. And somebody's asking after the program, how do clients continue on their own? So this is an excellent question, and you've probably already heard us mention the maintenance programs, which is exactly how clients can continue if they don't want to continue, like try to figure out things on their own. Michaela, maybe you can talk us through what the maintenance program is and how it helps to support those long-term bone density gains.
Sure. So the maintenance program is what you can transition into after you complete your first 13 weeks. We kind of consider that first 13 weeks of the program like a boot camp or a foundation building where you're really building the habit of showing up, you're learning the principles of exercising for improving bone density, and you're getting that coach support to really guide you through that process. And then once you have that foundation built, we have some options for moving into a maintenance program. The maintenance programming includes 3 different tiers, so you can sign up for more or less support depending on what you feel like you need. So if you're someone who needs that accountability buddy, you would sign up for the higher tier and your coach would be there to support you. If you're like a fly solo kind of person, you can sign up for the lower tier and then you'd have the programming delivered to you and you can just do it on your own. But what the programming includes, it's going to be very similar to the programming in the original 13 weeks, with the addition that in the programming itself, we have instructions on how to increase your weight, when to increase your weight. So it's built into the programming that there is progression. And we also include an extra, or we kind of sub a strength training day in for a weight vest impact circuit. So as Karen kind of touched on earlier, we see improvements with impact and weight vest combined. So that's a little bit of a shorter day, but it has a lot of profound effects for your bone density. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility to have a shorter workout, but still get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of bone density. And it's basically like a monthly subscription. So it's kind of like a Netflix subscription where you sign up on, let's just say you signed up today on the 7th. On the next month, you would be billed again on the 7th. So you have a lot of flexibility in that as well. And you can also change tiers. So if you happen to get injured, you might bump up to a higher tier for a little more coach support to help you navigate that. Or if you want, you can drop down to a lower tier if you feel like you don't need that coach support anymore. So we have a lot of flexibility built into that maintenance programming, but it's basically a progressed continuation of the foundation you built in the original 13 weeks.
That's a great answer. And like a really classic or very typical example of somebody switching tiers is we had an email from one of our long-term clients just a couple of days ago who said that for a variety of reasons, she had kind of fallen off track with staying consistent with her program. And she was really unsure how to ease back in, knowing that she had probably lost a little bit of capacity along the way, and she didn't know quite where to start. So that is a perfect situation in which, you know, she benefited from switching to a slightly higher tier, so she had some coach access as well as the monthly office hours, so that she could have some questions answered, some suggestions provided for how to start loading again and how to progress gradually. Um, Leah, do you have anything to add about the maintenance program? Since somebody also a little bit further down in the chat, and this is up to you if you want to answer this, was wondering how long you had been in the program and how much your bone density had improved. So if there's anything you want to relay about your experience in the maintenance program and like the sort of consistency aspect, feel free.
Yeah, yeah. Um, So I would start off by sharing that I started, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think I started the program in August of 24. And so I just had my most recent DEXA scan since then because of how often you're allowed to have DEXA scans. And one of the things when I was early on trying to figure out how was I going to get the help that I needed to improve my bones, I remember being in an informational session sort of like this and having a participant who, in my role, she was there to talk about her experience. And she said, I have improved my bone strength and I have now moved from osteoporosis to osteopenia. And I said to myself, I want to be that person. I want that to be me. So I was really like determined. And Karen, my coach, can tell you that I've been overall consistent, but there have been times when I've had to step away or life has come up and I've missed workouts. So it's not like I've made every single workout every single time. But I was so thrilled when I had my DEXA scan at the end of, I guess in December, and I have moved from osteoporosis to osteopenia. And I'm just thrilled about that. I'm actually meeting with my endocrinologist next week, and I'm going to ask her some more questions about my particular situation. But I'm really hopeful that I will continue to see improvements as I continue to do the work that I'm doing in this phenomenal program. I would add that, I was really cautious when I started. And one of the things that I really liked about the CARI program is how research oriented and scientifically based it is. Like that was really reassuring to me. And the connection with the
Do you want to go on a walk?
Foundation was really crucial, and Bone Health Foundation. So I was wanting to make sure that the organization had a solid grounding in science and research and health, and have just felt so supported in my own work and bone strength building through that. And I'm just thrilled with the progress that I've had, and really credit the way this program is structured and designed and the wonderful women that I've worked with in it. And that's what's allowed me to have the success that I've had.
Thank you so much. I'm going to add also that your consistency and your dedication to the program are the reason that you've had the success that you've had. And thank you so much for sharing that. That really, these are the reasons why we do this work. So yeah, really appreciate that. And I think it's very interesting that there is still kind of like a narrative in the clinical world about how osteoporosis can only be managed but not reversed. And this is something that clinicians and researchers like tend to kind of repeat almost sort of on command. And we see in our program that this is simply not true. We are reversing, we're not just halting the bone loss, we are actually reversing it and improving people from osteoporosis to osteopenia. And this is it isn't surprising because this is the way in which the human body is intended to function. When it is challenged, it responds by adapting to those challenges and becoming better able to deal with them, which is exactly what's happening with resistance training and bone density as well. Thank you so much for sharing, Leah. That was really, really wonderful. Mary is asking if we could define axial loading a little bit more in detail and maybe show some examples. Karen, you are the obvious go-to person for this because I see you in your workout space with your weights behind you.
Yeah, so axial loading, we kind of alluded to this before, is a compressive force along the vertical axis. So, for most people, we're talking about osteoporosis in the spine, in the hips. So we want to focus on having that compressive force going down along our central axis, which is our spine. It's really easy to think of this in terms of lifting a weight straight up over the head. So if I were to grab 2 dumbbells and do something like an overhead press, that compressive force is pretty obvious because I'm holding something over my head, so you can see how the compressive force would come downward. However, it's really important to remember that your arms attach at your shoulder girdle. So anything that you hold in your hands is going to have that same axial loading that you get if you're holding the weights up above your head. So holding the weights here, holding the weights down here, holding them up in front of my chest, those are all going to put this compressive force from my shoulder girdle all the way down along the length of the spine. And as Michaela was talking about before, it's the pressure on the vertebra that actually tells them to get stronger. And when that's appropriately dosed, or meeting you where you are with whatever background you've got in exercise, that's where we see that stimulus that's needed to improve bone mineral density.
Perfect. I hope that gave a little bit more insight into this axial loading concept. Here's an interesting, I'm jumping ahead slightly and I'll come back to the previous questions. But Mary is asking if there are different exercises based on severity of osteoporosis. Michaela, maybe you can tackle this one because it's a little bit of a yes and or yes, but kind of answer.
So I would say there's not necessarily different exercises based on the severity of your osteoporosis, but how we approach your exercise routine might differ slightly. So with a more severe osteoporosis diagnosis, we would want to just start light. So start very conservatively, make sure that you're tolerating that well. So we would look for how your muscle soreness is the next day or the following days after exercise. And then from there, once we kind of know that you've got a good kind of baseline, you're not too sore after your workouts, everything is going well, we would just really gradually increase. And because we also do use impact exercises in our program, we would take that very same approach to the impact exercises as well. We certainly wouldn't start you off with a squat jump. We would start you off with something like a light heel stomp or a light calf raise to heel drop. And maybe you would even wear sneakers so you had additional padding between yourself and the floor for that heel drop. So the exercises themselves, we want to keep that same approach, that axial loading, that impact exercises, the things that we know are going to improve bone density, but we would just want to start conservatively and then build gradually. So it would be just a matter of kind of not going too fast through the process.
Yeah, one of the big features of our program and one that is consistently one of the most highly rated components of our program is the unlimited one-on-one coaching that you're receiving from your specialized coach. So the program is being customized to your specific needs. You need to be challenged at a level that is sufficient to stimulate bone density adaptations, but not a level so high that it exceeds your current capacity and puts you at risk of injury. So that means the coach is constantly threading the needle when it comes to the amount of load and challenge that you are being provided with so that we can keep you progressing and improving your bone density, but obviously while keeping risk of injury at a zero. Hopefully that answers the question. So same principle, just dosed out differently based on individual needs. Here's a great question. This person is 68 years old, has a left foot fracture and fragility fracture in the femoral neck in 2023. These are healed, but she's been cautioned against high impact activities. She does exercises at home and is a gym member. The osteoporosis is still severe, and she's using Tymlos. Osteoarthritis also an issue. Has always been active and still is, but feel limited in some activities. What exercises should I do? A lot to unpack here. Karen, maybe you can start us off. Let's talk about exercising post-fracture first.
Yeah, so we have a lot of people who enter our program post-fracture, and as long as you've been cleared medically to begin an exercise program, this kind of follows along with the same principles that Michaela was just talking about when it comes to the severity of your osteoporosis. We just want to make sure that we're dosing the exercise appropriately for wherever you are injured. It's very common that we have people coming in, not only healing from fractures, but also with a history of shoulder issues, a history of knee issues, a history of low back issues. And this is where that one-on-one coaching really comes into play, because you let your coach know about that. And if there's a particular exercise in your program that you're finding is irritating an injury that you have, we find a way to work around that, whether it's changing the exercise entirely and swapping it out for something else, or making a recommendation on the positioning that you're in while you're doing the exercise, or maybe we tell you to do it without any load at all, holding no external weights, so that your body just has a little bit of time to kind of work through adapting to that movement pattern. And then we can always think about adding weights back in later on. There are so many different ways that we can approach it, and it really just depends on the individual.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into the question about high impact activities. If your bone density is low and you have severe osteoporosis, you should not do high impact right off the bat. What you should do is regressed versions of impact exercises to provide a stimulus that your body can handle and adapt to in a productive way. Sarah, I'm hoping that you can maybe tackle in a bigger picture sense some of the other questions included in this. Diane is asking what exercises she should focus on. So maybe you can talk. We've had a little demo of the axial loading, the movements that provide axial loading, but maybe Sarah, you can talk in a bigger picture sense about an evidence-based exercise selection, now that we understand this concept of axial loading, as well as this other prerequisite of the progressive overload over time. Because I feel like once we understand these concepts, then it becomes less about the specific exercises and more about a kind of methodology that is going to serve people really well in the long run.
Oh, that was a long question. So if I don't answer it all, let me know.
We can come back to it.
Okay, all right. The yoga teacher in me wants to say everything's connected, right? So anything that we're doing is going to be benefiting other muscle groups. So yes, we do squats. Is very important to have that strong lower body, but we also focus on upper back, or we'll focus on shoulders, and because we're focusing on posture, we focus on those muscles that might help you with balance, so we reduce the fall risk. I don't know that it's the specific exercise, but it is, again, how can we continue to create challenge for you, meet you where you are, and then continue to create that challenge. And we can find lots of exercises to do that. So yeah, and then it's the consistency, right? That you're working on it. You'll see the same exercises multiple times, so you will have the chance to say, oh, I can do more, I'm feeling stronger this week. And then that overall, just sort of everything connected, you'll be feeling just like you could move a little bit better, feeling stronger in most areas. All right, what was the second part of that?
No, I think you covered it really, really nicely.
Okay.
The necessity for the increase in challenge over time, which actually is one of the biggest things where people tend to get stuck when they're trying to figure this out on their own. Is like,
yeah,
when this starts to feel easy, what do I do to make it harder? Obviously, I can increase the weight, but like this leads to another question that I saw further down in the chat that comes up often that Michaela, maybe you can address. Do people need to keep increasing weight till they're deadlifting 600 pounds?
Yeah, right. Hope not.
Yeah, exactly. Michaela, maybe you can talk us through some other ways to progress aside from the really obvious one of increasing the actual load being used.
Yeah, so first I'll say you might surprise yourself with what you're capable of lifting, so don't sell yourself short. And I think, Leah could probably attest to that, but many clients have, been really astounded with what they actually are able to do with that consistent effort. But we also understand, especially in a home setting where you don't have access to things like barbells and tons of heavy dumbbells, that there is going to be a limitation, maybe physically, maybe logistically. And that's okay because we have workarounds. So, what that looks like is that we have lots of variables that increase the challenge. Some of those variables include how many repetitions of the exercise you're doing. So, if you are kind of at a certain weight, you maybe don't have another dumbbell or you're not quite ready to jump up to the next weight that you have, maybe it's like a 5 pound jump, and that feels really big. You can increase the repetitions of that exercise. So instead of doing 8, maybe you can do 10 to 12. At a certain point, if you start going above about 15 repetitions of an exercise and it still feels easy, you probably do need to increase the weight of the exercise. But that 15 repetitions does give you actually a lot of leeway. So you can increase those reps. You can also increase the number of sets that you're doing. So if you were only doing 1 set to start with, you might come and start to do 2 sets and then eventually 3 sets. Eventually, you don't want to be doing a million sets because you only have so much time in the day. So again, that's a little bit limiting, but we have more than one factor to play with. So you can increase the reps and the sets. There's also the exercise selection itself. So some exercises are inherently harder than others. In terms of like a lower body loading exercise, when you're doing a regular goblet squat, that's going to be a little bit easier than a split squat or something where you're putting more of the load onto one leg. So exercise selection is a tool that we can use as well. We can also even play with the tempo of the exercise. Slowing down certain parts of the exercise can increase the challenge and help you build strength as well. So there's a lot of different factors you can use to help you navigate progressing, and a skilled coach is a really nice tool to have in your back pocket to help you kind of make the right choice for that progression.
Perfect answer. Leah, I'm wondering if you have anything to add since you are a living, breathing example of somebody who clearly has adequately progressed their programming.
Well, I can remember I asked this very same question and was like, "Oh my gosh, what? How heavy are these weights going to be?" And it is true, everything that Michaela said. There are lots of different ways to increase the amount of work that you're doing that are creative. And I think that one of the things that has been really helpful to me is having the capacity to work out at home instead of having to go to a gym has really allowed me to be more consistent. If I had to factor in travel time to the gym and managing when I was going to do a gym workout with the rest of my life, I would not have been able to be as consistent. But I've been able to have the things that I need in my home and to be creative sometimes, but also made the investment in the free weights that I need to have to be able to do the workout that I need to do. And so that's part of what has allowed me to be successful. I also think that it's important to name that I was pretty gym phobic or exercise phobic. Like I just didn't feel like it was my jam or that I knew how to do it. I was really self-conscious when I would go to the gym and just felt disempowered. Whereas going through the CARI program, now I feel empowered. Like when I go visit family out of town, I can go to the local gym and do my workout there because I feel like I know what I'm doing now. And that's because I've been taught how to do it so well. So there's been a real just sense of personal empowerment that goes with all of this as well.
That's such a good perspective. And I think it also goes to kind of feed into Michaela's point about you might surprise yourself at how much you can do because the reality is that when you're doing it, you are getting stronger. So when you actually try the next heavier weight or the slightly more challenging movement, you can do it because of everything else that you've done leading up to that point. So the progression and the improvements ironically end up feeling like a very organic and natural part of the process if you are kind of following along and staying consistent over time. So the improvements almost just like happen to you as you're making your way through it. We've got an interesting question about whether the exercises for building bone in the hips and the spine are different. Karen, I'm going to hand that over to you, but first I want to answer just a couple of logistical questions about the program that people have asked in the chat because it's really easy to lump these together. Somebody was asking about the coaching accountability check-in and how that works. So in the 13-week program, you are in daily contact with your coach. They're basically there to answer all of your questions, and you are prompted for feedback on every single one of your workouts. We also prompt you to track your weights and your reps in the program and to report back on your levels of recovery. When all of this information basically tells the coach how you're doing and how your body is adapting to the exercise stimulus, which is then the data that allows them to tell you when to increase the weight. So I hope that answers the question. Somebody asked how many people are in each cohort. We usually cap them at about 25, and that's because we want to ensure that unlimited one-on-one coaching for everybody within the group. If we end up with a larger group that has, multiple people with very complex situations that need a little bit more of a hands-on approach, in those rare instances, we might bring on a second coach just so that the work is kind of divvied up between two coaches in a way that allows for that kind of interaction. Let's see. How long have we been working with this population? So this program has been running for about 3 years. We've had over 300 clients come through the program. Our coaches have a combined total of about 8 or 9 decades of experience working with this population. Susan is asking about the cost of the original 13 weeks. So the upfront payment for the 13 weeks is $10.95, or you can also do 3 monthly payments of $400 to spread the cost over time. If the cost is prohibitive, please just email us, and we're always happy to work out a longer payment plan to kind of fit your budget as well. The maintenance tiers range anywhere from $69 a month to $199 a month for the more interactive, high support tiers as well. Cool. And then we'll sort of loop back to this question about the exercise selection. I did want to mention, Leah, as well. A few people have asked for a little bit more context on whether you are using medication. You should not feel obligated to answer that on the call or on the recording if you prefer not to. So you're welcome to put that in the chat if you want, or just not to. That's kind of a personal thing. So
I'm happy to share. So my goal when I was first diagnosed was to get as much information as I could. And I really have been trying not to take medication because I wanted to see if I could improve my bone health without doing that. And so at this point, I am working with an endocrinologist who has put me on HRT because I'm eligible for hormone replacement therapy. And then I also I would say that the strength training has been by and far the biggest part of my health and recovery, but I have been more intentional about my calcium intake. I'm actually somebody who can't eat dairy, so that's part of what was a problem in my life, and I wasn't really tracking it as a younger person around, am I making sure I'm getting enough calcium? So I've been more intentional about that. And one of the things I appreciate about the CARI program is it is a holistic program in looking at one's health. While it doesn't include a lot of nutritional components in the program, there are some suggestions. And so I've been doing collagen as part of what I've included in my diet. And I'll just add as an aside about the whole comprehensive piece, in addition to the lovely structured workouts that really help you feel empowered to improve your health, there's also yoga component. There's also a lovely part of each workout that Yenny has that is, it's like the reward or the treat at the end where you get to stretch and reset yourself. And so I always just am so appreciative of that. And then there's a day of reset, which really does include meditation-like practices and breathing practices. So it's really more than just doing hard workouts. Or challenging workouts. It is about really having a quality of life that becomes just nourishing in multiple ways.
That's a lovely way to put it. Thank you so much. And then for a little bit more context about the medication question, which we get a lot as well, we don't require our clients to tell us if they are choosing to do pharmaceutical treatment, but most of them do end up sharing what they are doing. So I can very confidently say that the overwhelming majority of our clients are either trying to avoid or delay taking medication. So that would be like a typical client for us. They're wanting to try these lifestyle modifications first, and we do see 80% of people showing improvement at their next DEXA scan when they've stuck with the program for long enough for their next DEXA to roll around. Okay, we took a bit of a detour, but Karen, I'm coming back to this question about whether the exercises to build bone in the spine versus the hips are different.
Yes, they actually are. So what research has shown is that axial loading that we've been discussing to this point is more effective for the spine. And then it's the impact training that seems to have a little bit more of an impact for the neck of the femur. And that's a particularly vulnerable area for fracture. So it's really nice that we're starting to understand what we can do to target specific areas of bone and give them the stimulus that they need.
Perfect answer. Thanks so much. Um, let's see, we tackled this one already. Michaela, maybe you can talk, actually, Michaela and Sarah, maybe you guys can talk a little bit about the time commitment required for the program. Sarah, why don't you start us off with talking about the strength training workout specifically?
Yeah, so that will change as you go through the program. What we're hearing is when people first start is the programs take a little bit longer just because you're watching videos. And we really do encourage you to watch those videos so that you feel confident in your movement and your form when you're exercising. And so people will say, this one took me maybe almost 2 hours, but not all of it was work. It was watching video and then doing the exercise. And then that time definitely decreases as you go through the program, as you get more confident and you've like, oh, I've seen this one before. I know what to do. You also know what your weights are because you've been tracking it. So you don't have to think so hard. You're just picking up the next weight and going for it. So people find it manageable is what we're hearing. Maybe a little bit longer that first week and then definitely just sort of fits into their life.
Yeah, that's a great point. As you're getting more familiar with the delivery platform, the structure of the workouts, the kind of flow, there's less and less of that like needing to do everything for the first time, which understandably does take longer in that first like maybe week or two. But the coaches are obviously there to answer your questions and support you along the way as well. So there are 4 strength training workouts per week. Those are kind of, we refer to them as the meat and potatoes of the program, just because they are the most impactful when it comes to improving bone density with exercise. But then we also have these supporting movement practices like Leah was mentioning. Michaela, maybe you can talk a little bit about those other 2 days and what we include in them and why.
Yep. So we have like Yanni said, 4 days of strength training, and then we also have an active yoga practice. That is by no means like a power flow or anything like that. It's a nice, steady paced, approachable yoga practice, but it is moving. So that one usually takes about 30 to 40 minutes. I would say most of them tend to land right about in the middle. 35 minutes is what you can kind of budget for those. And the purpose of that is to improve your posture, improve your balance by moving through different planes of motion, by kind of turning your body in different ways and learning how to navigate yourself in space. Yoga is also been shown to lower our inflammation response, and a lower inflammation response actually does help to improve bone density or support bone health as well. So there's lots of benefits to yoga. It is also just a wonderful, if not everyone loves yoga, but I would say most people do feel better after having practiced yoga. So it can be also supportive of stress, and stress also plays a role in bone health. And then, kind of along the same vein, we have our recovery practices. The recovery practices are really intended to do exactly what they sound like, to help you recover from the work of your strength training efforts. And I think it's important to say here too that when you're strength training, you're kind of creating the impetus for improved muscle strength, for improved bone health, but it's in recovery that you actually get all of that benefit, which is why we include it and why we place a big emphasis on it in our program. So you need to take that time to let your muscles and your bones rebuild after placing that stress on them in your workout. So our recovery day, we kind of call it like a menu or like a buffet, meaning you can take as much or as little as you want from that recovery day. But it always includes three practices. We include a self-massage practice, a gentle or a restorative yoga practice, and then a breathing or a meditation practice. And so if you were to just choose one of them, it might take you as little as 5 to 10 minutes. If you were to choose all of them, it might take you up to about 30, 35 minutes. And then we have one full day off as well. I think you're about to say something, Yenny.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. And I was going to add that you have the freedom to move the days around within the week as well, so that your less busy days are going to be the ones where you slot in the more kind of time-consuming strength workouts, and then you've got the flexibility of those shorter days when your schedule is a bit more packed on any given week. Couple of good questions here, which I'll sort of combine together. Is the maintenance program more to maintain the improvements from the initial 13 weeks, or should we expect to continue to see possible improvements if we're dedicated to continuing and increasing loads? So hopefully this question has been partly answered with the discussion on the different variables that we can tweak outside of just how heavy the weights are, that are going to provide that novel stimulus to keep your bones increasing their density. Now, bone remodeling is also quite slow, so you should absolutely expect for the improvements to be coming in like well beyond the 13 weeks, because we know that bone remodeling happens over months and years rather than just weeks. So the 13 weeks is designed to give you the baseline fitness and the education to understand why we're doing and why it works, so that you have then the sort of you're empowered and feeling confident in continuing in a slightly less structured high touch format. And then I think you had a follow-up question here about this is not a silly question, but I know this is a lifelong commitment to manage osteoporosis, but do people need to keep increasing loads for the rest of their lives, or is there a point when you get to real maintenance? It is a lifestyle, a permanent lifestyle change, as you mentioned. The load is not the end all be all, so there's lots of different ways that you can continue building in that variability and that challenge. And then you were asking about, for example, after some meds, I hear you can lose bone quickly when you stop, but will that happen with a lifestyle change like this? So the answer is that your bones are constantly adapting, along with every other tissue in your body, to the ways in which they are being challenged or not challenged. So if you were to completely stop exercising, your body would have no incentive to continue this calorically very expensive process of maintaining dense bones and lots of muscle tissue, which take up a lot of nutrients and fuel to keep up. So your body, being very smart and economical, would adapt by getting rid of some of that bone density and muscle mass, and you would lose some of those gains. Though that being said, this is not like an overnight thing, which hopefully has been highlighted many times over with this notion of consistency over perfection. So it's not like if you go on vacation for a week and you don't exercise, it's like all is lost and all of your progress goes out the window. So there's definitely some wiggle room. And the research also shows that people that have sort of accomplished higher baseline levels of fitness have a much easier time returning to those levels of fitness when they restart exercising, even after a break, than people who are basically starting from scratch and trying to get there. So hopefully that provides some reassurance as well. Okay, moving on. Okay, Susan has a great logistical question. I'm also concerned about my level of confidence with technology. I have a desktop computer only. Does that work? And would I have technical support? So that's a great question. We do offer lots of technical support as part of the program. We know that some people need a little bit of assistance getting set up. That being said, the program is delivered via an app that is optimized for mobile use. So that means that it works best on mobile phones and tablets, Apple and Android. That is our recommendation for the most seamless and beneficial user experience. Okay. Edie is asking if we can explain impact exercises. Sarah, would you maybe like to tackle that?
So impact is sort of what it sounds like. Anything that creates a little bit of impact. So your foot leaving the ground and then hitting the ground is a little bit of impact. And then, of course, we can adjust the intensity of that. So a march is a certain level of impact. And then to add more impact, maybe like a jog in place. And again, don't let that scare you. We can always start with wherever you are. Maybe it's the heel lift, like lifting your heel off the ground, dropping your heel, that adds a little impact.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. And Karen, I see you are a research nerd when it comes to impact exercise. Maybe you can add something here to the discussion as well.
I think I was half expecting you to ask me to
Yeah.
demo, so I was like,
You're chomping at the bit.
I'm getting ready. So no, I just, kind of echoing what Sarah was saying, when you begin impact training, we're always going to meet you where you're at in terms of your level of existing fitness and your experience with doing anything that involves impact training. But yeah, impact, whenever your foot hits the ground, there's a ground reaction force. So your foot hits the ground and then the ground sends a force back up your body. So it's kind of the opposite force from axial loading. So axial loading is a top-down vertical force, and then impact training is a bottom-up force. And so that's why we include both of them in our programming, because now we're kind of tackling things from two different directions. And in addition to those two forces, you have the force of your muscles pulling on your bones, and that tugging is another stimulus that tells your bones to get stronger. So there's a whole bunch of different things at effect and at play here as you go through the program.
That's a perfect answer. And the reason that we build more of the impact exercises into the maintenance program is because that is a stimulus that requires a little bit more adaptation to be done safely and effectively. So it's not the kind of thing that you want to just like jump into, no pun intended. Great logistical question about what equipment do we need besides weight and a weighted vest. Michaela, maybe you can talk us through that real quick.
Sure. So in general, you're going to need a few different sets of dumbbells. We tell people that they're going to want a set of light dumbbells, medium dumbbells, and heavy dumbbells. And if you have questions about what that actually looks like for you, after signing up for the program, that's when you get access to your coach. And so they can review your intake form, ask you a couple follow-up questions, and give you more specifics. But just kind of think broad principles, light, medium, and heavy weights. And then you'll also want your weight vest. Yoga equipment like a mat and a set of blocks. If you happen to have a yoga blanket and bolster, that's great, but you don't need them. You can make do with household items. Same with a yoga strap. And then we do recommend getting a box for step ups. You can make do in the beginning with something like the bottom step of your household stairs or a yoga block, as long as it's nice and firm and steady. But eventually, most people want a little bit more height to increase the challenge to progress the exercise. So we do kind of recommend that you invest in that. Let's see, resistance bands. You're going to want a set of long looped resistance bands and a set of short mini looped bands. And then if you aren't like me or Karen, you don't have bars attached to your wall, you're going to want to get a door anchor so that you can anchor the resistance bands to the doors for certain exercises. And that does come with the set that we recommend. I think that covers pretty much all of the most important items. And when you sign up for the program, we do include an equipment list with hyperlinks to make it really easy for you.
Yeah, exactly. And we only include pieces of equipment that have truly been tried and tested by all of our team and our coaches. So these are things that we ourselves use that have been kind of vetted for durability and quality as well. So they're a solid investment. All right, so we've got a couple of minutes left. We have not too many questions, so we'll probably go over a little bit. Feel free to stay to hear the answers to these. If anybody, coaching team or Leah, if either any of you need to go, feel free to hop off. So a couple of logistical questions. How long does the cohort class last? So the program is 13 weeks, and after that, you've got the option to transition to one of those maintenance programs. Trish is asking, what is the time frame for a daily workout? So I hope that we've explained about the duration of each type of workout that's included in the program. As far as when you actually do the workout, that is completely up to you. So the week is structured with specific things on specific days, but you can move those around and you can do the workout at any time that it fits into your day. We have clients from all over the US and even internationally. So it would be extremely challenging and not very effective to require everybody to do the workout at a specific time. Great question from Mary about whether, and is anyone familiar with OsteoStrong and its effectiveness? So we have opinions on OsteoStrong, but I think what's probably more impactful is to let you know that the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation specifically has gone out of their way to state that they do not endorse the OsteoStrong method because there is a distinct lack of high quality research and evidence to support its effectiveness. And there's a whole variety of issues with their method in terms of both the research that has been conducted on it as well as the method itself. The methodology that they use doesn't really stand up to reasoning when you think about basic human physiology. So it is not something that we recommend. Oh, great answers, Michaela. Thank you for putting those in the chat. Another great question. I work with a personal trainer 2 times a week. Will this program work along with the in-person workouts? This is sort of a multi-layered question. Without knowing what you're doing with your personal trainer or understanding what research or methodology has been used to put together that program, we can't really speak to the efficacy of what you're doing. When people ask about continuing other activities, like for the duration of the 13 weeks with us, what we usually tell them is that, you're obviously welcome to continue doing anything that you enjoy, but most people do opt to prioritize their workouts in the 13-week program so that they can get the most value out of their time with us and access to their coach. So it might not be the best use of your time to spend time doing activities that are not actually bone building if that is your priority, if that is the intended outcome of your exercise, especially if doing those activities leaves you with less time and less energy to actually do your osteoporosis specific exercises. Let's see. We do not have a brick and mortar clinic, so all of our programs are delivered virtually. And that is actually for reasons of efficacy and like cost effectiveness as well. It would be extremely expensive to assemble equivalent services in an in-person setting, considering a personal training session with an osteoporosis specialized trainer would probably cost like about $100 per session in most cities. So doing this in a cohort-based but individually coached format is how we can actually make it affordable at this price point. Let's see. Oh, good question about OsteoBoost here. So I was only tested for osteopenia. Is there any info on effect on severe osteoporosis? This would be a question for like your question about shaking up lumbar bones. This would be a question for your doctor. There isn't any research done on OsteoBoost for osteoporosis, but from what we hear from them, most physicians are happy to extrapolate that it would have a similar effect on osteoporosis as osteopenia, although that is there's more research needed on that, as Karen just said as well. Oh, this is a great question. Edie, maybe you can talk, Karen, maybe you can address Edie's question about having had 2 total hip replacements for osteoarthritis. How does being diagnosed with osteoporosis after having the total joint replacement influence the life of the joint replacement?
So we have had other people come into our program with knee replacements and hip replacements, and essentially when you're improving the strength of the musculature that is around the joint replacement, that's going to help to maintain the integrity of that joint replacement. So in terms of actually saying how long each joint replacement, because it's a mechanical device, has its own, lifespan. But I can tell you that the more you build strength around that joint, the more stable it's going to be and the better it's going to serve you.
Yeah, perfect answer. Jilly is asking about something that we mentioned in the email about this session. Michaela, can you talk a little bit about the efficacy of free weights versus gym machines, please?
Sure. So gym machines are going to set you on kind of like a set trajectory of movement, whereas free weights, you have to control the weights yourself. So we actually prefer free weights quite a bit over gym machines because, for one thing, they often provide much more axial load than a gym machine does. Oftentimes, those are kind of taking you through a set range of motion, and you're not getting that nice compressive force through the spine that we've already really talked about today. The other benefits of free weight is that they actually help to improve your balance and your core strength because they are kind of throwing you off of your center of gravity, and you have to utilize your body awareness, your balance muscles, and your core muscles to help you come back and control that. So we really love to utilize free weights over gym machines because of those reasons.
Lots more bang for your buck from one
Mhm.
versus the other. Um, uh, and another question about travel plans. If we have trip plans during our 13 weeks, we will miss out on important program content for that time period. So it kind of depends. If you have access to Wi-Fi and your equipment or equipment in general, then in theory you can complete your workouts. For people that have just a short trip planned and no access to equipment, we do offer some travel workouts that require only a resistance band. Um, we're also always happy if, like, life gets in the way to offer you a little bit of an extension beyond the official program end date so you can get through the content without feeling rushed or hurried. But the caveat is always that we don't recommend planning a ton of travel for the 13 weeks because that does end up being disruptive to your ability to stay consistent and kind of really maximize the value that you're getting out of the program. Um, what is the difference between spinal flexion and a hip hinge? Maybe Karen, you can demo this quickly.
Sure. So spinal flexion is a rounding of the spine. So if you think about kind of rounding your shoulders, whereas a hip hinge would be maintaining a neutral spine that's elongated. And instead of the fold coming here at your spine, it's coming down at the top of your thighs where your thigh bone meets your hip socket. So here's a hip hinge. And then this would be spinal flexion if I were to kind of round down this way. And that's the thing we're trying to avoid. So if you've been told to avoid spinal flexion or rounding, and some doctors will say folding forward, but you can fold forward. You just have to know how to do it using that hip hinge technique.
Yeah, the other phrase that gets used a lot is bending forward, which kind of covers both of those things, and it can leave you feeling quite confused and disempowered about how to actually go about your daily life when both things are lumped together and one is risky and the other is perfectly safe. So this is a big emphasis in our program as well. All right, we actually got through all of the questions and went over only by 7 minutes, which I think is pretty good for us. Sometimes it goes on for a lot longer. So we really appreciate all of you being here and sharing your questions and your insights. Thank you for joining in. I want to add real quick before we hop off that our January cohort was actually sold out a couple of weeks ago, but we've had unexpectedly a couple of spots open up at the last minute. Michelle, who's here, very quickly acted and snagged one of those earlier today, but we do have one more spot left to start on Monday. And that does not actually put you in a huge time crunch or anything like that because there's a whole intro week built in that is partly designed to give you a buffer in which to get familiar with the technology, connect with your coach, go through the introductory materials, get any equipment or weights that you don't yet already have. So that intro week is built for people to be able to sign up, the morning of the program start date and still have the time to get set up. So if you would like to snag that one last remaining spot, I'm going to put my email address into the chat. Send me a message to this email, and the spot is yours if you would like it. We're going to send out a replay of this session in a newsletter tomorrow in either case. If you want to go over anything that was covered, if you think of other questions that have come up in the meantime, you can just hit reply on that newsletter and get in touch with us directly. We are also currently filling up our February cohort, which is about half full right now. We do expect that one to sell out as well. Our recent cohorts have been filling up about 2 weeks ahead of their scheduled start dates. So that is the next available option, but we do also have start dates in March and April. We have about a quarter's worth of program start dates published at any moment in time on our website. And again, we're very easy to reach. You can simply hit reply on any piece of email communication that you receive from us, and either myself or our executive assistant, Joyce, will answer within 3 business days, and usually much more quickly than that. I want to thank you again for being here and spending part of your day with us to come and meet and chat with us. We really sincerely appreciate it and love connecting with our community. So thank you all for being here. I want to thank Michaela, Karen, and Sarah for sharing their time and their expertise. Leah, thank you so much for joining in and being willing to share about your experience. We really, really appreciate it. And I know that it's so helpful for others to be able to hear from the client perspective too. So thank you for taking the time. Much appreciated. Shoot us an email if you have any other questions, and we look forward to hopefully welcoming you to one of our groups soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Bye-bye.